Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Join us every weekday at this time to discuss news, spend time in the Word, and receive answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, Kathy. How are you this
Good morning.
Great morning? And it's a beautiful time. My wife and I are actually at the Biltmore, Inn at the Biltmore in North Carolina.
That's one of y'all's favorite spots, right?
Favorite spot. Beautiful spot of rest and recreation and time. We get a lot of time together in the Word. Whenever we do a vacation or a break, we actually go deeper with our spiritual walk because it's such a beautiful time where we're doing less work things and less, stuff on emails and computers and stuff, and we're walking and we're sitting together and we're processing our issues of life that we're seeking God's will for, and then what is God saying to us about our abiding and the truth of it. And so then we use a great time to pray. And prayer is, what do you have to say, Father? Help us to get clarity of your will, so then we can pray that, because he said, if you pray my will, it's going to happen. So we said, well, let's discover his will and pray it. And last time, we talked about is God of the New Testament the same as God of the Old Testament? The answer is yes. And what that means practically, by the way, is then all of Scripture is to be explored with God to speak to us all of that truth into our life, and he interprets it and he helps us understand it, so that, for example, and we discussed this last time, the Old Testament will say, well, in order for it to be well with you, you have to be obedient. Well, that's still true, but he says, now let me help you understand something about that. It's still true, but actually I put myself within you to learn to be obedient. He said, really what I need you to do is stay with me and let me walk you through the truth to receive that truth, so that you have a heart to be obedient. And by the way, the Old Testament, this is David, by the way, speaking in Psalm 40, he says, I really understand something. It's set up that you have sacrifices and offerings. He said, really, I understand. It's not really that alone. It's not just doing that. There's a truth behind that. But he said, it's really that I have a delight to do your will. He said, that's what this is all about. And of course, the New Testament is that I've given you a heart to be able to do my will and to hear my will and to follow my will, which is a beautiful thing. And so, as we look at abiding, is be open to go over all the Old and New Testament wherever God takes you, and just keep asking, what does that mean, and how do I understand this? And particularly when I'm called to do something and faced with something, like, for example, a lot of people that I deal with, particularly that are having financial trouble, get faced with a simple question. Are you tithing? Interesting enough, this is really an interesting response. Well, that's Old Testament. And I don't need to. Well, no, it's still there. And then I said, let me help you get to the truth of that, because it's not about, like David understood, it's not about performing it.
Right.
It's the heart behind it.
And there's a reason that God has commanded that, because he's fighting for your heart in that.
That's right. And he says, because of your money or your income or the things you have, everybody is going to be tested in that specific thing. Is, do you trust me by giving a tithe and more to my work first? And then I'll bless you, and it's a test of your heart. And by the way, I give you permission to test me right back to see if it's not true, that I'll fulfill it. So when people struggle with it, it's like, yeah, but I don't have enough money to do it. That's why I'm in trouble. Yeah, I know. Well, why don't you go with God and see if I say to them, well, you should just be obedient to it. And even if they said, okay, fine, they haven't really gotten to the truth of it.
Right.
Because, well, then I'm just performing it as a formula as
Instead of
opposed
God
to
letting God really change our heart with
change
it.
my heart about it and let me learn something about that. Is that if I trust you truly by demonstrating this, but it's a heart thing, not a performance, then you will demonstrate your love for me and in your covenant life for me. And I learn that. And then the joy of giving, is remarkable. So that when I have people who start this, I actually tell them, I said, it's okay that you feel that way. I said, now let's get in the Word, react to that Word, and then let's process it. And they do. And they come to the first conclusion they come to is God says, it's clear, both Old and New Testament, He loves a generous heart and He wants me to be giving. Do you understand? Yep, I understand that. Okay, are you going to follow that? Well, no, because I don't have the money to do that. Until God blesses me, I won't be able to have the money to be generous. And God says, actually, it's the other way around. Is that when you're generous, and then I'll give you the money to experience it, and you're going to have to trust me. And so there's a block with, yeah, but okay, that's okay. And see, God doesn't say, well, then you're out. He just says, look, stay with me longer. My Spirit will lead you into that truth, into that faith, into the belief of this through your processing. And there's no rush to it. But if you stay with me, you will get there. And when you get there, you will then say, I understand it and I'm willing to do it. And you take that step of faith through the power of God. Why? Because He put Himself within you, which is the beautiful fulfillment of the New Testament. So all really God says, and this is why we teach abiding as the principle of everything we do, is it's not about performance. It's about walking with Him through these issues of life, through these wounds, through these things that we hold in our heart that aren't true, to let Him to bring us into the beauty of that and express it. And all we have to do is stay with Him and enjoy it. So go
As
ahead.
you say that, I think I've shared this recently on here too, but it just again reminds me of that Romans 6:5. For if we have been united together in the likeness of His death, certainly we shall also be in the likeness of His resurrection.
Yep.
And that word for united translates as the same basically as congenital twins. And so if you can picture us united with Christ in His death, and then the power of resurrection life is all tied to simply being united with Him, which is abiding,
Right.
Staying connected to the vine. And as we are united and abiding with Him, our invitation is that newness, that resurrection life, and all the power that comes with it. And He will walk us right into these things.
Yep. We have probably now a couple weeks ago we were trying to finish our sessions on prayer and Paul's prayer in Colossians, and we had a question about first of all, it was about tongues. And we talked about that, and then there was a question about the Nashville tragedy with, where is God and how come, God didn't prevent that, and we went through a whole series of that. Then we had another question about, well, is the God of the Old Testament and the New Testament the same, which we've gone through. And then through our discussion about the Nashville tragedy, where we talked about the world being wicked and that God doesn't restore the world back to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, but rather gives us the power to have the victorious life in the trouble, and that someday His way of handling it all is going to not restore it or repair it, is to destroy it. And then He creates a new heaven and a new earth. So the question came up, which is a really good one. Well, I thought He did that once already. Didn't he do that with Noah and the flood? And there was wickedness, and he basically destroyed the people of the earth, and had Noah and his family, start over. And why doesn't he do that again? That was the question. Why doesn't he do that again? So let's look at that, and we'll try to understand it. So this is Genesis chapter 6, 1 through 7, or 1 through 8 to start with.
Sure. Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. They were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord.
Okay. So this is an interesting passage that says that the wickedness, the evil of his creation had gotten so bad that God said he was grieved because there was nobody that had a heart to follow him at all, by the way, except Noah. Noah and his family said, well, of all the people on earth, there is one, and that's Noah and his family, who found grace, which means favor, or they have a heart to follow God, and they're not accepting the wickedness, evilness of the world. Now, this passage is tricky because it implies something. One, it says the sons of God. Is that through the line of Seth that just became super wicked, and they dominated and took over, and everybody was really completely anti-God. Just, I don't even have a heart for God, anti-God. The other interpretation, and there's scripture that support this, when it refers to the sons of God, it's really talking about the angelic.
Interesting.
And the demonic. And so did somehow Satan and the demonic physically be able to take wives, have children through that, which doesn't seem, for us, that we can't fathom that. How does that work? And by the way, it hasn't ever happened since. So was that happening? And they got even more wicked and evil because they had already rejected God. Their children then were rejecting God because their substance, their nature was wicked and evil. And we can't imagine how that even worked, if it did, but it appears scripturally that maybe it did, and that there was something going on. In any case, it was either a lineage of God's line through Adam and Eve, or it was these demonic that came. But he looked at it and he said the wickedness was so great, and this is in verse 5, that every intent and thought of every person was only evil continually. Okay, so there wasn't even a thought in all of that is, should we consider following God at all? It was no, all the time, every time, every person was thinking and only doing evil, and he could project it and say, well, it's going to continue to go that direction, and there's never going to be anybody that has a heart, to follow me. And so he's looking and saying, I'm kind of sorry that this is where it wound up. Now, by the way, did that surprise him? No. But he said, and this is interesting, think about the very purpose of the creation of man in itself.
Mm-hmm.
Why did he create Adam and Eve? Why did God create Adam and Eve?
Well, for his glory.
Yeah, for his glory and for his fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
Is I want fellowship and intimacy with my creation, and because he keeps saying that you are in my image, I'm here to have fellowship with you. He says, my joy is you. My joy is you walking with me. My joy, God speaking, is you are my inheritance. Because I get to be with you, and that's part of the beauty. And we actually, I think yesterday we talked about that in our retreat. Somebody made the comment is they were amazed of how beautiful that heart is for us people, that God cares to that level to want to speak to me, process with me, draw me into his personal life. And that's why he created it. And God says here, where it has gone is to a place where that fellowship no longer is available to him.
That communion's not even there, right?
And not even a possibility of it, because they've gone so far in their wickedness. And he said, well, there is one, Noah, and his family. So what does he do? He says, well, I'm going to destroy it. So he does. I will destroy man off the face of the earth except for Noah and his family. So then he has the flood, and then if you jump down to chapter 8 and go down to verse 20 through 9:1, this is now after the flood, so he's been destroyed. Noah has survived it in his family because he built the ark, and he lasted. And by the way, there wasn't. This is think about the faith of this. There wasn't such thing as rain prior to that. It was moisture that was present on the earth as kind of a dew, but there wasn't a rain, and there wasn't ever any thought of flooding or needing boats. So when he said build this construction that's going to float. Why? Because it's going to rain. It's like,
defied all logic.
Like Noah could have said, well, that doesn't make sense. He said, I know, but, get ready. And so he did, and he survived it. So read verses 20 through 9:1.
Sure. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and he took every clean animal and of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a soothing aroma. Then the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake, although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night shall not cease. So God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth.
Yeah, which is, by the way, the instruction he gave Adam and Eve. Be fruitful and multiply. And he says, still, and this is in verse 21, because Noah and his sons are still humans. Okay, so what do they have? They have a sin nature.
Right.
So their offspring is going to have a sin nature. And he says, I understand this. The imagination, the thinking, the thought of man's heart is evil from his birth, basically. He says, I understand the sin nature, and I'm going to have to, resolve that because of self and because I handed over, the authority to Satan and the world is wicked. He says, even though I did it this time, I'm never going to do it again until, by the way, he does destroy it. You can read this in Revelation chapter 20 and 21. He actually does destroy the whole thing. And now we repopulate it with translated people who have been living in heaven with him, and we now live together on a new heaven and a new earth. And he says, so I'm going to bless them, and I want them to repopulate the earth. Okay, now jump down to in chapter 9, go down to
11 to 15.
Yeah, 11 to 15. Yeah.
Thus I establish my covenant with you. Never again shall all the flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. Never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, This is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. It shall be when I bring a cloud over the earth that the rainbow shall be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. The waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh.
Yeah. So he says, I'm making a covenant. Again, this is the what's called the Noah covenant, and it's
and this is different than the
well,
Abraham covenant,
or remember,
or similar, or
well,
how does it tie?
it's similar because the covenant itself, which then he defines for Abraham and then for all of us, and he gives it to David and Jacob, and he gives the same covenant. This is the beginning of it, and that is that I am going to purposely offer blessing to every person that lives on earth, and no longer will I destroy. Of course, at the end he does, but rather the covenant is in the rainbow is you can be assured that I stand, God speaking, to offer you blessing. And I'm not going to destroy you, but rather I'm going to offer to you the life that's available to you through me. And I want that to be a sign of the rainbow, is to be a sign of that, so that you're remembering that I'm remembering.
Right.
And
which is what a beautiful gift too,
yeah,
by the way.
Yeah, and he says that, because he says this, and you can read like Psalm 111, for example, is he says, I'm ever mindful of the covenant. In other words, I remember it all the time, I'm thinking about it all the time, and then I will command it if you have a heart to follow me, and you can receive it because I've done it. And he said, I wanted the rainbow, which will be universal, by the way, around the world, is a signal, a sign, an imagery that I am loyal to this covenant. And yes, I did do this once, but I'm never going to do it again. And now I'm going to appeal because, in a sense, that wickedness, which is why it kind of supports maybe the demonic was involved, is no longer by itself the pure nature of man. Do we have a sinful nature? Yes. But actually there's no pure wickedness in people. There is something there that could be appealed to receive God and receive life, which is then why he then set up Abraham and said, let me form a nation of followers so that the world can understand who I am, and then ultimately Christ will come in the fullness of time, and I'll sacrifice my own son to give you the covenant, and now you can live it. And everybody, which is the great mystery, is that it's not just then for the Jews, it's for everybody that in the world to understand the truth of Christ, that you're separated from him, God is holy, there's a problem, and the only remedy is the sacrifice that Christ made himself to take on that penalty so that we could all have life and have it super abundantly. And so he's saying to Noah and to everybody behind it is that life is available to you, and I'm going to be ever mindful of that. So from our perspective, it would be, well, God, the world's pretty awful. Why don't you just do this again, and
right,
and start over, and or just end it. He says, well, actually, I'm going to end it at some point, but the time isn't right yet. There's still people that are going to come to know me. They're still going to have fellowship with me, and you are my representative of the invisible God on earth. And so that's why abiding and following and being part of that is so critical. With our mission is to spread the good news, both to people that don't believe, that they would believe and then join that, and then to people that are believing but aren't following it, so that you can enjoy it as well and then be proponents of the truth. So we just know that he did do it. He said he wouldn't do it again, and we can be assured of it. So therefore the world we're living in is a troubled place, and we can't just say, well, why don't you just end it and take care of it or restore it? He said, well, I'm not going to restore it. Even the world that he had with Noah, he didn't restore because they were still sinful people in a wicked place under the control of Satan. So he just said, I'm going to restore the opportunity, to have life again. So hopefully that answers that question at least somewhat. And I would urge you to get in the Word and process it further, because it's true. We don't have a complete explanation of it all.
Right.
And that's, God said, that's all I'm going to say about it. And so we can't say, oh, yeah, but I want to know more, I want to know more, I want to know more. And he says, well, I've told you what I want to tell you. So, enjoy it.
Right.
So, Kathy, we will return and finish our time up with Paul's prayer next time. But we got some good distractions here to move to different places.
Questions to talk through for sure. And I think even just today's reminder, as you talk about that, is just that beautiful reminder of God's heart of grace and for all people to come to him and to get to know him personally and to have eternal life. And so the graciousness of him not being willing to destroy the earth again right now is a beautiful gift, right?
Yeah.
Even in difficult times.
Yeah, and that's really
such incredible grace.
Exactly. That's really the question, is that, well, for me in my house, and as Joshua said, is, well, we understand this, and our call is to serve him now.
Yes.
And not attribute what we think God should do, but rather, given that this is where we are in a troubled place, may I follow him and enjoy the covenant life and the beautiful life, which he says is available, and I want to have you remember that I remember it all the time. So that's a great reminder. So we'll pick this up next time and look forward to it.
Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Yep. See you then.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.